Hello and welcome to the program, everyone. I'm Layo Adegoke. We begin the program with stories and happenings that made headlines over the weekend.
On Saturday, head of the local Caritas Catholic charity said the city of Pemba will not be able to cope with the influx of people following the deadly Mozambique insurgent attacks in Palma that began last week. Manuel Nota, who leads the Pemba branch of the Catholic charity, raised concerns about the rise in crime and exposure to COVID-19 as survivors crowded in a makeshift camp in a sports hall. A boat carrying around 1,200 survivors arrived in Pemba on Thursday, April 1st. Aid workers believe the attack, which began on March 24th, has displaced tens of thousands of people. Libya's first shipment of COVID-19 vaccines arrived the country on Sunday. The Ministry of Health said more than 100,000 doses of Russia's Sputnik V COVID-19 vaccine arrived at Tripoli's Mitiga airport. Around 1,000 new infections are announced daily by the National Center for Disease Control, posing a challenge to a health sector that's already ravaged by years of conflict. A box of the vaccine was shown being unloaded from a cargo plane in a social media post by the Health Ministry, saying it would be moved to the ministry's warehouses before distribution. Foreign ministers of Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia began talks on Sunday in Kinshasa in the hopes of resolving their dispute over Ethiopia's Renaissance Dam. Democratic Republic of Congo's President Felix Tshisekedi, who became president of the African Union in February, opened the talks, calling for the establishment of a positive model for regional cooperation based on the principle of mutual interest. Both Egypt and Sudan lie downstream from the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which Addis Ababa says is crucial to its economic development. And finally, an Egyptian museum, which now houses a collection of ancient Egyptian mummies, officially opened its doors to the public on Sunday, with the mummies due to go on display later this month. The Egyptian Museum for National Civilization was originally founded to document the history of civilization, including the Stone Age, ancient Egypt, and the Coptic Age. After being closed for several years while undergoing renovation, it received its official inauguration on Saturday when a convoy transported the mummies of 18 kings and 4 queens from the Egyptian Museum in central Cairo's Tahrir Square.
Mozambique's military says it has regained full control of the coastal town of Palma more than a week after it was raided by militant Islamists. An army spokesperson says a significant number of militants were also killed in the counter-offensive. State radio reports that residents who had fled were starting to return, some of them to their homes that had been looted. Dozens of civilians were killed and at least 11,000 displaced after the militants invaded Palma. The militants, known locally as Al-Shabaab, have pledged allegiance to the Islamic State group. Their assault on Palma forced energy giant Total to suspend its multi-billion-dollar natural gas project in Afungi, a short distance from the town. European Council President Charles Michel is stressing that the European Union's support for the new unity government in Libya. Mr. Michel was welcomed by Libya's Prime Minister Abdulhamid Deiba and Foreign Minister Najla El Mangoush, and held a meeting with the President of the Presidential Council of Libya, Mohamed Al-Menfi. During his visit, Michel stressed the readiness of the European Union to provide all forms of support to the national unity government to enhance stability in the country and to hold elections.
You have created an opportunity to rebuild your country, but there is one precondition. All foreign fighters and troops must leave the country. The implementation of the ceasefire agreement and the respect of the UN arms embargo will also be crucial in this process. The future of Libya is in your hands. You have a unique opportunity to build a united, sovereign, stable, and prosperous country. And the EU has been engaged also through the Berlin Conference to actively support the process of national reconciliation. And economic recovery and governance, security and stabilization based on the rule of law, human rights, gender equality, and of course migration. These are some areas where the EU can bring its expertise. I shared with the Prime Minister very concrete suggestions for how the EU can practically support Libya.
In South Africa, the Health Minister, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, has appealed to people to keep adhering to the COVID-19 health safety regulations so they won't have to bury their loved ones shortly after celebrating Easter with them. While many spent the Easter in churches and with their families, some people threw caution to the wind as they celebrated. COVID-19 infection numbers are down, and the government says a third and possible fourth surge in numbers is still expected in the country.
Across the country, Easter celebrations range from the usual. To the sometimes daring which threw COVID safety measures out of the window. Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize, in his Easter message, called for continued adherence to safety regulations.
At this time, we've managed to rise above COVID-19 and keep the transmission rates low. Let us therefore use the holidays to celebrate our hard-won victories, but also to reflect on the war that coronavirus continues to wage. We do not want to celebrate Easter with our friends and family only to bury them the following weekend. The government remains committed to the protection of our people, and this year millions of South Africans will be counted amongst the vaccinated in the world. But whilst we roll out vaccines, we must celebrate safely and continue to wear masks, sanitize, avoid crowds, and obey the regulations to protect ourselves and our loved ones.
Many also spend time giving to those who have lost all or have little. Nigerian ex-soccer international player Ida Peterside, who now heads a church and a charity, says religious bodies need to do more for their congregation as the difficulty many face today is quite glaring.
I think the church is the first place. Organizations like the church must reach out. I said so during the service. Most times people come and they give to the church, they come, they donate. What do we do with the donations? What do we do with what people give to us? Jesus said, I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me water to drink, which is what the gospel is all about. Easter celebration like this, so many will go to their houses without food. The thing is to give hope, preach to them, and give back to the society, which is what we did today.
Work resumes on Tuesday in South Africa as many people return from their various holiday destinations to an expected increase in fuel prices at midnight into Wednesday. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
Well, we're still staying in South Africa. While his mother battled cancer, Goitse Konopi struggled to find a reliable supply of quality medical cannabis for her oncology plan. After her death in 2014, Konopi decided to start South Grown, a 100% black-owned company that produces medical cannabis for export.
Goitse Konopi never imagined he would be growing cannabis for a living. But the struggles with accessing medical cannabis before his mother died from cancer in 2014 left him looking for ways to make quality reliably available. Those answers led him to start South Grown, a 100% black-owned company that produces medical cannabis for export. In the middle of his 17-hectare farm, the 29-year-old has a sizable cannabis tree which contains the indigenous rhubarb and Swazi gold genetic that he uses to cultivate his cannabis.
We are youth-owned, black-owned, African-born, and we are one of the smaller players, in the context of we haven't raised large institutional capital from existing players from Canada or the like. We've largely raised from African venture capitalists who backed our vision and were aligned with our vision.
Due to strict regulations and processes in South Africa, Cannabis' dream of being able to sell cannabis for public consumption recently came to life after acquiring domestic and international licenses to cultivate, process, manufacture, distribute, and export THC, CBD, and CBG containing products. CBD is the non-psychoactive ingredient in marijuana which is said to relieve anxiety, while CBG is used for treating pain, inflammation, and in cancer treatments.
We spent about 7.5 million rand, and that went into cultivation, building the facility, the standard operating procedures, the guidelines that you need to conform to, the policies and processes that you are navigating. All of that was costly.
The company's first international clients are based in Australia, Israel, Germany, and Poland. Canopy will be exporting packaged high THC dry cannabis flower, retailing in pharmacies and licensed medical cannabis clinics in 1 gram, 3 grams, and 5 grams formats.
In Australia, for instance, the company that we're working with has a chain of cannabis dispensaries, not only in Canada but also in Australia. So they've got cannabis clinics where you walk in, you see a physician, the physician will give you a prescription, from that prescription gets filled in the dispensary. And those are the kinds of partnerships that we're working with. So in Europe, we're working with a pharmaceutical distributor where it's about exporting the product to them, where they then wholesale it to pharmaceutical or to pharmacies in their jurisdiction, and they then make their margin and we make ours.
Canopy is negotiating to export CBD-infused ready-to-drink beverage line that will include THC for the Canadian market, where Cannabis 2.0 was recently legalized. Southgrown is currently experimenting to create pharmaceutical compounds that treat the conditions and symptoms of many ailments, such as appetite loss, cancer, epilepsy, and mental health conditions like schizophrenia and post-traumatic stress disorder.
Still ahead on the program. Canadian R&B singer The Weeknd promises to donate $1 million to Ethiopians caught up in the conflict in Tigray. We'll give you more details after the break. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. Nigerian startup Grisid has created a Wi-Fi-enabled cooling box that can keep blood, medicine and vaccines at a correct temperature while being transported in the tropical heat. The company plans to help ferry COVID-19 vaccines across Lagos. The storage boxes can keep items as cool as -20 degrees Celsius using just a mobile app.
Distributing vaccines across Nigeria's hot and dry terrain is not an easy feat. The country's limited facilities mean that medical samples need to be collected and transported, often through poorly maintained roads, to laboratories, sometimes miles away.
Before we refer patients to the lab, but now when they came here, they make the job easier for us in taking the sample to the lab, and it's easy our service delivery.
So last year, the government hired logistics startup Grisid to help transport temperature-sensitive items. The company now uses cold chain monitoring boxes to move blood and plasma samples and vaccine vials. The cold boxes run on solar-powered batteries that can keep the units working for up to 24 hours. And they're the brainchild of Nigerian engineer turned entrepreneur Ogenetega Iotim.
If you look at the African terrain, you know that some of the major challenges are one, communication, but secondly, which is more importantly, the lack of access to grid, which is access to power. And so for that, when you look back, you would see that there were challenges around accessing ice packs or ice gels that are required as a precondition when transporting things like vaccines or samples from the last mile to the city. With this now, which you know, this is like a solar-powered, battery-powered device that doesn't require all those. So without the infrastructure, this work.
The company launched its Wi-Fi linked cooler boxes in 2019, meaning customers can track products and their temperatures in real time using a mobile application. The company charges at least 1,000 naira for delivery services, depending on the weight and distance packages are going. They plan to extend to other African countries, supporting health sectors and beyond.
To security matters now, still here in Nigeria, residents of Michika community in Adamawa State are appealing to the state and federal governments to beef up security in the community following fears of attacks by Boko Haram insurgents. According to members of the community, the popular Kamwe Cultural Festival, which holds during Easter celebration, could not hold this year for security reasons. At the peak of attacks by the insurgents, the people of Michika fled their ancestral homes but returned only a few years ago.
Michika local government area of Adamawa State has had its fair share of attacks by Boko Haram terrorists, but there has been a lull in violence in the local government, which boosts the confidence of the Kamwe tribe to go ahead and put together one of its most important events of the year, the Kamwe Cultural Festival. The event is aimed at fostering peace and unity and restoring the livelihood of this community affected by insurgency and to help trauma of victims. But everything changes with this message from the chairman of the planning committee that security agents are warning of an impending attack on the community.
We got an information yesterday that there is a security threat that Boko Haram will come into the town, and so we should postpone it. That's what they told us. We are not happy, but since they said it's an insecurity issue, we cannot go against their statement.
It's devastating news for a community that had worked for months to perfect this project, as Kamwe's sons and daughters converged on the seemingly peaceful administrative headquarters of Michika local government area before news broke that it's no longer possible. Security operatives take over the venue to ensure no one gains access.
There are two big markets in Michika holding today. The central market in the city center, you people can go and view it, it's filled up to capacity. The cattle and grain market in Jidel is filled to capacity. The People's Democratic Party, Michika local government, is holding their stakeholders meeting in Michika today. Does it mean that the insecurity is affecting the cultural day? What of the market? I mean, this is pure politics.
To portray a community to be not secured, I think is one thing that His Excellency, the Governor Umar Fintri, need to really take note of that. To really look into this issue of how unsecure the place is, because he is our son, he's from a nearby community, Madagali. So whatever that affects this is really not a good thing for us.
For many indigents of Michika, the festival and what it aims to achieve is laudable. However, they caution that the threat by Boko Haram should be taken with all seriousness, as it may lead to serious repercussions for the community.
Well, it appears the tense situation in Tigray in Ethiopia is stalling, as Ethiopia says Eritrean forces are withdrawing from the region in the northern area. However, it is difficult to verify this withdrawal, as phone connections have been down for days.
The Ethiopian Foreign Ministry said Eritrean forces have started withdrawing from the Tigray region in northern Ethiopia, following mounting reports blaming the Eritreans for human rights abuses, including rape, looting and killing of civilians. The United States, Germany, France and other G7 countries this week called for a swift and verifiable withdrawal of the Eritrean soldiers, followed by a political process acceptable to all Ethiopians. For months, Eritrea and Ethiopia denied the presence of Eritrean troops, despite dozens of eyewitness accounts. Just last month, Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed acknowledged their presence, while Eritrea has still not said its soldiers are there. Ethiopia sent its troops to Tigray in November to fight against the TPLF, which had attacked army bases in the region. In late November, the TPLF withdrew and the Ethiopian government declared victory. Electricity and phone connections to Tigray have been down for the past 4 days, making it difficult to verify any Eritrean withdrawal. Thousands of people have been killed in the conflict, hundreds of thousands have been forced from their homes, and there are shortages of food, water and medicine in the region.
Meanwhile, international R&B singer The Weeknd has promised to donate $1 million to Ethiopians caught up in the conflict in Tigray. The star, born Abel Sefaye in Canada, is the son of Ethiopian immigrants. He says his heart breaks for his people as innocent civilians ranging from small children to the elderly are being senselessly murdered. Fighting between the Ethiopian army and the Tigray's People's Liberation Front began in November and has left millions of people homeless. The fighting started when Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed sent forces to the Tigray region, accusing the TPLF of attacking a government military base. The TPLF had been the ruling party in the area but fell out with Mr. Abiy over his efforts to increase the central government's power. And that's all we have for you today on Network Africa. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.